Have you ever caught yourself thinking, you know what? It's not worth it. Let it go. I'm better than this. How many times have you bitten your tongue, held back the truth, swallowed that comeback, not because you agreed, but because you didn't want to argue? You told yourself it was maturity, that staying quiet was the right thing, that being silent made you the bigger person. Well, here's the hard truth. Every time you do that, you betray yourself. We live in a world that praises surface-level peace. From childhood, we're taught that avoiding conflict means you're mature, that politeness means staying quiet when something hurts, that walking away is strength. But the truth? That's just fear in disguise. Nietzsche saw it clearly. What we often call virtue is actually fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of being rejected, fear of being labeled as aggressive, difficult, or selfish. But here's the thing. As long as you keep living to please others and avoid tension, you'll keep swallowing your own voice. Nietzsche called this slave morality, a set of values built not by the strong, but by the weak. People who didn't have the power to fight back, so they learned to hide behind humility, obedience, and silence. Over time, this way of living became the norm. It became the behavior society expected from you. So now, without even realizing it, you think you're being a good person, when really, you're just letting yourself be controlled. Pause and really ask yourself, how many wrongs have you allowed just to keep the peace? How many times have you stayed silent even when you knew you should have said something? How many insults, passive-aggressive digs, or acts of disrespect have you tolerated, all in the name of not causing drama? I'm not saying you need to start fighting everyone. That's not the point. The point is to reclaim your right to exist with dignity. Because if you don't face conflict when it matters, it's going to eat you alive from the inside. All that swallowed frustration doesn't just disappear. It builds. And one day, it's either going to explode out of you in a way you regret, or worse, you'll shut down emotionally, numb, tired, disconnected, thinking that being a good person means being harmless. But here's the truth. There's a way out, a real path of empowerment. And it starts with a shift in how you see conflict, not as a threat, but as a doorway to freedom. That's what this video is about. We're diving into Nietzsche's powerful insights on why you fear confrontation, how this fear still silently controls your life, and, more importantly, how to overcome it. Are you ready for some uncomfortable truths? Stick around till the end. This might just change how you see the world and yourself.
To really understand why conflict feels so scary, you have to zoom out. This isn't just about your personal experiences. This fear goes way deeper into the core of how human values were formed. And no one explored that darker territory better than Friedrich Nietzsche. In his book, On the Genealogy of Morals, Nietzsche explains something shocking. The values we call good today, like humility, obedience, self-sacrifice, they didn't come from strength. They came from weakness, from people who had no power and no voice. Imagine ancient times, when strength was everything. Warriors, nobles, leaders, they didn't apologize for asserting themselves. They didn't feel guilty for wanting more. Their idea of good was tied to power, courage, and ambition. But then there were the others, the ones who couldn't win by strength, the weak, the powerless, the ones who couldn't fight back. So what did they do? They flipped the game. They started calling the strong evil and called their own powerlessness virtue. They glorified traits like submission, patience, and humility, not because they wanted to, but because it was the only way to survive. It was a survival tactic, a moral trick. And over time, this mindset became a system. Slave morality, a value system born from resentment, not freedom. Nietzsche saw it for what it was, not real goodness, but a rejection of life's vitality, a system that taught people to retreat, to shrink, to avoid standing out.
And you might think, well, that's ancient history. But no, it's still here. It's in how we're raised. It's in what teachers, parents, and even social media reward. Think back. How often did you hear things like, don't talk back, be nice, don't cause problems, let it go, it's not worth it? From a young age, you were trained to believe that being quiet was being good, that avoiding confrontation was being mature, that putting up with discomfort made you a better person. But it didn't make you better. It just made you easier to control. Every time you bite your tongue, lower your eyes, or stay quiet to keep others comfortable, you're being ruled by that same slave morality. Now, here's something important. This doesn't mean you're weak. It means you were taught to fear strength. You were taught that setting boundaries is selfish, that saying no is rude, that speaking your mind makes you a problem. And over time, that training becomes a pattern, psychological conditioning. You start to feel anxious around confrontation. You second-guess your voice. You avoid speaking up even when your gut is screaming. And what happens the longer you live like this? You become bitter, not on the outside, but deep down. That's what we're going to explore next. Because when you constantly repress what you feel, when you avoid necessary conflict, that energy doesn't go away. It turns into resentment. And resentment, as Nietzsche describes it, is one of the most corrosive forces in your soul. In the next section, we'll unpack exactly how resentment grows inside you and why it slowly destroys your self-worth, and what you can do to finally break that cycle. If this is starting to make sense for you, stick around. What comes next is even more important.
Nietzsche was a master at digging into the hidden corners of the human soul, and he didn't pull any punches when it came to this topic. On the genealogy of morals, he explains that resentment doesn't start as bitterness, it starts as blocked energy. The moment when your instinct says, stand up, speak up, do something, but you don't. You freeze. You stay quiet. You keep the peace. But that energy, it doesn't disappear. It has to go somewhere, so it turns inward. And instead of becoming action, it becomes poison. That's resentment. Resentment is what builds up when you wanted to say something, but didn't. When someone disrespected you, and you let it slide. When someone crossed a line, and you smiled and said it was fine, but it wasn't fine. And you know that, because you've replayed that moment in your head 100 times, thinking about what you should have said. That's resentment at work. It's subtle, but it's powerful, and it gets worse with time. The resentful person isn't just hurt. They start to create a story to justify why they don't act. I'm the bigger person. I'm above all that. I don't stoop to their level. Sounds noble, right? But let's be honest, it's a cover-up. It's a way of saying, I was afraid, but I'm going to pretend I'm virtuous. And Nietzsche calls it out. He says this moral superiority is an illusion. Beneath the surface, it's just unprocessed frustration. It's anger that has no outlet, so it simmers. And over time, that simmering turns to decay. You feel it, even if you don't admit it. Every time you're polite on the outside, but boiling on the inside, that's resentment. Every time you let someone guilt trip you and you pretend not to care, that's resentment too. Every time you hold back and then punish yourself later for it, that's resentment too.
And here's the worst part. The more you avoid confrontation, the more resentment you build. And the more resentment you carry, the less you feel capable of standing up for yourself. It becomes a vicious cycle. Eventually, that resentment starts shaping your identity. You become the person who's nice, who's easygoing, who never complains. And people praise you for it. They think you're selfless. But inside, you're tired, bitter, angry, unheard. And over time, that turns into something even more dangerous: self-pity. You start to see yourself as a victim, always giving, never receiving, always being the good one. But here's the truth. You're not just a victim. You're a participant in your own suppression. And I say that with compassion, not judgment, because we've all been there. But Nietzsche doesn't want you to stay there. He believed fiercely that we're not meant to live like this. We're not meant to be passive, quiet, resentful shells of ourselves. There's a way out of the cycle, a path forward. And it all starts with reconnecting to something powerful, something ancient and deeply human: the will to power.
Now, before you jump to conclusions, let's clear something up. The will to power is one of the most misunderstood ideas in philosophy. People hear it and think, oh, it's about dominating others. It's about control, ego, aggression. But Nietzsche didn't mean that at all. He wasn't talking about crushing people or seeking power in the political sense. What he meant was something far more personal. The will to power is the fundamental drive in all living things to grow, to express themselves, to become more. It's what pushes a seed to break through the ground, what drives a child to explore, what fuels an artist to create, or a thinker to challenge the status quo. And most importantly, it's what drives you to speak up, to draw boundaries, to claim your space in this world. But the problem is, you were taught to fear that instinct. You were taught that desire is dangerous, that standing out is arrogant, that wanting more is greedy. So over time, you buried it. And what you buried turned into resentment, passivity, and a fear of your own strength.
Reclaim it. Reclaim your will to power, not by dominating others, but by refusing to let yourself be dominated. To do that, you have to challenge everything you are conditioned to believe. You have to unlearn the false virtue of silence. You have to stop equating conflict with violence. And you have to realize life is conflict. And that's not a bad thing, because conflict isn't just about arguing or fighting. It's about asserting. It's how you grow, how you clarify what matters, how you define who you are. So how do you start? Step 1. Recognize that avoiding conflict isn't noble. It's fear. And fear only grows when it's fed. Step 2. Start small. Say no to something that drains you. Call out a pattern you've been tolerating. Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. Step 3. Stop apologizing for taking up space. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to want more. You're allowed to speak. That's what Nietzsche meant by the will to power. It's about being fully alive, fully human. It's not about hurting others. It's about finally stopping the hurt you allow within yourself. And yes, this isn't easy. It's not a switch you flip. It's a process, a transformation, which is exactly what Nietzsche describes in one of his most beautiful metaphors: the three metamorphoses of the spirit. You start as the camel, obedient, burdened, quiet. Then you become the lion, strong, assertive, defiant. And finally, you become the child, free, creative, joyful. That's the real path forward. And in the next part of this video, we're going to explore that journey step by step, how to go from burdened silence to fearless expression, and ultimately to creating a life that's truly yours. Stick with me, because this next part might be the one that changes everything.
Now, let's talk about the actual transformation, what Nietzsche described as the three metamorphoses of the spirit. It's one of the most powerful metaphors in all of philosophy, because it doesn't just explain how people live, it maps out how you break free. First, there's the camel. The camel is strong, but not in the way you might think. It's the kind of strength that endures, that carries burdens, that obeys without questioning. It kneels, takes the weight, and says, "Yes, I will bear it." Sound familiar? The camel is the version of you that's been trained to follow the rules, meet expectations, keep everyone happy. The part of you that says yes when you want to scream no. The part of you that quietly absorbs everything because you think that's what makes you good. But here's the thing. Camels don't create. They don't decide. They carry. And worse, they start to take pride in their suffering. They think, "Look at me, how much I've endured, how strong I am for being so silent." But that strength, it's the strength of submission, not freedom. That's where most people stay. It feels safe, it earns approval. But eventually, something cracks. You start to feel the weight isn't noble anymore, it's suffocating. That's when the second transformation begins.
Enter the lion. The lion is not here to carry. The lion is here to roar. This is the moment your spirit rebels, the moment you stop apologizing, the moment you say enough. The lion doesn't want to obey anymore. It wants to carve out a space where it can live on its own terms. But there's a challenge. The lion must confront the great dragon. Nietzsche describes this dragon as glittering with golden scales, and on each scale is written a commandment, "Thou shalt." Thou shalt be obedient. Thou shalt be quiet. Thou shalt not rock the boat. Thou shalt be nice. This dragon isn't just society, it's your inner programming. It's every message you absorbed since you were a child. And to become the lion, you have to fight it. This is the battle most people fear. Disapproval, rejection, guilt. Because when you start to say no, people push back. They tell you you're selfish, you've changed, you're cold. But let me tell you something. That resistance is proof you're on the right path. That's what it looks like when a lion shows its teeth. The lion doesn't seek to destroy others, it seeks to win back itself. But the journey doesn't end there. The lion may clear the path, but it doesn't yet know how to build. That's where the final transformation begins. The child. Once you've shaken off the weight of others' expectations, once you've roared and reclaimed your power, you reach something deeper. The child is not a return to weakness, it's a return to possibility. The child is the spirit that creates. It doesn't live in reaction anymore. It lives in creation. It makes its own values, chooses its own rules, says yes not because it's told to, but because it wants to. This is where life starts to feel light again, authentic, joyful. The child doesn't need to prove anything, doesn't carry old bitterness, doesn't need to defend every boundary with a sword. It simply lives, fully, freely, with integrity. And that's the goal. Not just to say no, but to say yes to yourself, to your voice, your vision, your real life. But to get there, you have to pass through the fire,
through the camel's burden, through the lion's roar, through the battle with the dragon of thou shalt. There are no shortcuts, but the reward? A life where you no longer betray yourself.
At this point, there's one question left to ask, maybe the most important of all. Who are you really? Nietzsche's answer is both simple and terrifying. Become who you are. He didn't mean be yourself like some feel-good slogan. He meant that becoming yourself is a battle. It's not automatic, it's not easy, and it definitely doesn't come from doing what everyone expects. Think about it. How much of your life have you lived trying to please others? How often have you picked a path not because you wanted it, but because someone else wanted it for you? Your parents, your partner, your boss, society. And how many times have you silenced your truth just to avoid being uncomfortable? Nietzsche says that this is the real trap of existence, not that we're forced to wear masks, but that we grow so used to them we forget they're masks at all. Most people never become who they really are. They adapt, they perform, they chase approval. And the cost? Their identity becomes blurry, watered down, forgotten. Every time you suppress your will, a part of you dies. Every time you avoid a necessary conflict, you dilute your sense of self. Every time you say yes when your soul screams no, you drift further from your real identity. Because here's the truth Nietzsche understood. Conflict is where identity is born. It's only when you push back, stand up, set a line in the sand, that you start to discover what actually matters to you. No conflict equals no clarity. No clarity equals no self. No self equals just a puppet playing roles. So what does it mean to become who you are? It means you must risk losing approval in order to gain your soul. It means you must choose discomfort over deception. It means you must become the kind of person who chooses truth over peace. And yes, this road is lonely at times, because once you stop living by the rules of the herd, there's no one-size-fits-all path. You'll have to make your own, build your values, decide what your life looks like. But what you gain in return? A life that's real. One where every yes comes from alignment, not fear. One where every no is an act of self-respect, not rebellion. One where every day you get closer, not further, from who you really are.
Let's end with one last painful truth. Your silence has a price. Every time you tell yourself, it's not worth it. Every time you think, let it go, it won't change anything. You're not just avoiding a fight. You're teaching the world how to treat you. You're telling them, you could walk over me, I won't stop you. And people notice, especially the ones who want to take advantage. Unspoken boundaries are invisible invitations. And every time you swallow a truth to keep the peace, you create a lie inside yourself. Nietzsche said it clearly, a morality built on fear doesn't bring peace, it rots your soul. And the only way out is courage. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to act even while afraid. So next time you're tempted to stay quiet, ask yourself honestly, am I being wise or am I being afraid? That question, if you answer it truthfully, can change your life. You weren't made to be a camel forever. Inside you is a lion, and beyond that, a child ready to create a life that's truly yours. But it starts here, with a decision. If you've made it this far and something inside you is awake, then say it out loud. Write it in the comments. Say, I choose to no longer remain silent, because saying it is already a step, a small roar. And you never know, that one roar could be the start of everything.